morning, everybody. Welcome into Bills Nation here on FingerLakes1.com. Paul Russo and Kyle Evans here with you this week. Jim Crope on the road. We are here. We're going to be recapping and discussing the Bills' overtime loss to the Eagles yesterday in Week 12. Then we're going to look ahead as the Bills get their bye week finally this week. And we'll talk about some expectations and outlook for the team for the rest of the season. But first, I want to take a quick second and thank the sponsor of today's podcast, Lil John and Barbie Orthodontics. Dr. Lil John, Dr. Barbie, and their outstanding orthodontic team share a common goal to ensure the overall wellness of each of their patients through their exceptional orthodontic care. You can check out Dr. Rod and Dr. Liz online at liljohnortho.com. So, Kyle, first, hope your Thanksgiving was good. Probably for many Bills fans, the peak of their weekend happened Thursday. But, you know, I don't know really where to kind of begin with this because I was telling you off air a little bit. You know, we get to halftime, and I need to run to the store really quick, do that, come home in the span of 15, 20 minutes or so, if that, and get back, and all of a sudden it felt like, oh, the Bills are losing all of a sudden. Like, what the hell? And it's weird. Like, I don't, you know, looking at the highlights, to me anyway, didn't seem like it was anything offensively oriented yesterday. But for kind of the first time all year, kind of felt like the defense was the big letdown overall in a game.
Yeah, I mean, you're up 10 on the road in Philly where they haven't lost all year. Jalen Hurts wasn't moving the ball much. DeAndre Swift had 3 rushes in the first half. Even if you look after the third quarter, the Bills are up 24-14. And then they fell behind 28-24, but Josh Allen leads them on that nice go-ahead drive, and you're looking for your defense to come up with, you know, one big stop. And they allowed them to get into field goal range. A questionable timeout decision by Sean McDermott allowed Jake Elliott to, you know, have a little extra time for the 58-yard or 59-yard field goal, because Philly had no timeouts at that point, so they would have rushed onto the field and kicked that field goal. But Sean called a timeout, allowing Jake Elliott to go over and kick a few extra times in the net. So that was a questionable timeout because then he could have used it with the 20 seconds that were remaining. But then the Bills take a knee. That was also questionable for me because they were literally the ones who saw their season end in 13 seconds in the same situation. So, I mean, there's just so many different things you could point at. Tyler Bass having a rough day. James Cook dropping a wide open touchdown. Josh Allen not being on the same communication with Gabe Davis in overtime. I mean, there's just so many different things. I know the big topic today around the area is Sean McDermott, you know, not being the head coach moving forward because of all these games. You know, these big games are always on the losing end. I mean, they're, 8-15 in one-score games in the last 3 years? When there's a big game and it's a one-score game, they're always on the losing end. So if you were to live bet the Eagles yesterday, that would have been the best decision you could have done because the Bills don't win these overtime games and they don't win close games.
Yeah, specifically Josh Allen-led Bills teams they're winless in overtime.
Yeah, and Sean McDermott's 1-6 since he's been in Buffalo.
So
yeah,
there's a couple things. I want to, I guess, maybe circle back to, I guess, maybe the first half in a way. I know you mentioned Tyler Bass having a rough game, and I know the one was tipped, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was tipped.
But you bring up a good point with James Cook, and I know he dropped it. Probably should have had it no matter what. I don't want to do the full devil's advocacy thing here. It was wet. I mean, that was a bad weather game, more or less. You know, if it's a couple degrees colder, we're probably talking about how it's one of the favorites of everybody with a snow game. But another case, too, of James Cook kind of not getting used a ton after that drop immediately. And
14 straight plays after that on the bench.
And this is at least the third time now this year we're kind of having this discussion of, like, should should he have dropped it / fumbled it? Right? No, like absolutely not. But to hold out your RB1 for such a long time, it to me it's just asinine. I don't get it. I don't know if that's, and this is something that I think is worth discussing. I don't know if that's McDermott making that outright call. I don't know if it's, in this situation, Joe Brady now making that call. To take a little bit from a different pot here, they had this discussion, and I was one of the sickos watching all the Patriots-Giants game because I couldn't bring myself to watch Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, to just be honest. But I found it interesting on the broadcast. They were talking about how they find it odd that Saquon Barkley in certain situations is on the field, and we came to learn that Saquon actually makes those calls where if he's just too gassed in that moment, he'll just take himself out. And so we know with that situation, right, that's a running back's call. That's the player's call, nobody else's. James Cook doesn't have that veteranship yet to do those calls, which just, to me, that we have to point the finger at McDermott, to me at least anyway, for sure, because you can't let your like I said, you can't let your RB1 just not be on the field for 14 straight plays. You can't, especially in a game where I know the Eagles' run defense is way better than their pass defense. I actually do want to talk about that a little bit here, but in a bad weather game where the run game has to be at least leveraged in some way, shape, or form, you can't be allowing that. You can't let, frankly, your ego get in the way of what is best for the outcome of your team in that day.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely a Sean McDermott thing, and it's just odd that it seems like nobody else gets disciplined for their mistakes but James Cook. And it's funny that as soon as he comes right back into the game, he makes an immediate impact. I mean, on that go-ahead drive late in the fourth quarter, they're running the ball, and James Cook had a 10-yard run, a 12-yard run. I mean, he can be explosive at times. And I also found it interesting earlier in the game, they were trying to just run up the middle against that defensive line. But then on that final drive, they're running on the outside, and that was working. So I'm kind of wondering why they didn't move to that quicker. But anyways, they still finished with 173 rushing yards. And, they still, like I said, had other opportunities to win the game and just never did. And I think penalties really killed them too. Most of their penalties actually came in the first half. Obviously, there were some bad calls, but there were some calls that were right. So, there was just still opportunities to win the game. It came down to the defense getting a stop, and they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, can we tackle that ref thing just quick and maybe put to bed? I'd like to think collectively between us and when Jim is here, we're all pretty level-headed in this sense, and I'm not defending the refs by any means, but if you want to take a look around the NFL yesterday, the Bills-Eagles game was probably about as middle-of-the-road reffing as you could get. It was not a banner day for the officiating yesterday. Did you see the Jacksonville-Houston game at all?
Yeah,
because that game for a very veteran crew was bad, like real bad. So I kind of maybe get where some frustrations maybe lie though, but if you are sitting here today as we are live and recording it right now 10:10 a.m. and you're still blaming the refs, I check yourself really quick and find something different to die on. Is my advice.
And they actually gifted the Bills a nice roughing the passer call in overtime. I thought that was weak. And like they weren't calling other stuff that I thought was more blatant like earlier in the game, but then they called that roughing the passer. I know it was a late hit, but it just seems like if that was earlier in the game, they weren't going to call that. So maybe it was a make-up call. I think the only reason penalties are really a discussion is because the Bills should have had a bigger halftime lead. They actually hurt themselves. And because the difference in the penalties, Philly had 4, Buffalo had 11. That's why the Bills lost 80 yards in penalties. But again, there's still opportunities for this team to win, and the defense, let them down.
Yeah, let's kind of get to the defense first, and then circle back to the offense here a little bit. kind of the first time all year, we've talked about the linebackers and obviously the front, but this is the first time all year, to me anyway, that the secondary was the leading tackler group for the Bills. Micah Hyde had 6, Poyer had 6, Taron Johnson 6. You have to get to Terrell Bernard, really, where you have your first, what I'll call interior guy, really, more or less. Although I guess the way they use Johnson, I guess you could maybe classify him up there. I don't know. Either way, there's only 2 total sacks for the Bills also yesterday. Greg Russo had 4 tackles and a fumble recovery. Terrell Bernard had 5 tackles and an interception. But that being said, again, I have some problems with the way that this might be old man yells at cloud type take here, but the tackling was awful yesterday, I thought, especially towards the end by the Bills. And then, more than anything, this is on McDermott because he's calling the defense this year. I don't know what type of schemes he was drawing up there, especially at the end, but my God, he went to the Hugh Freeze School of Secondary and coverage on those last couple plays. At least he didn't rush 2. He was rushing 4 each time at least. But the fact of the matter is, especially on what ended up being the game-winning play, you can't have the middle be that wide open. And there were several instances of that yesterday, but just the most glaring one of them all ended up being the one that ended the game.
Yeah, it was definitely a tale of 2 halves. I mean, I thought the Bills' defense dominated the first half. Obviously, Philly only scored 7. I thought they were getting a lot more pressure, and even though they weren't getting a ton of sacks, I thought they were, forcing Hurts to get the ball out, especially that first opening drive. They came out swarming. And then, if you remember, they even opened the third quarter and forced them a 3-and-out.
Yeah.
But then after that, all of a sudden, things clicked. And, man, Philly, put up 30 points combined in the second half and in overtime. And it was bad. And, Sean McDermott's, just playing like a soft zone. I mean, you look in overtime, it's a 3rd and 4 just across the 50. Tyrell Dodson is covering Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
5th-string linebacker, basically. It just makes no sense. It seemed like they were just kind of playing to not give up the winning touchdown. So they're just playing way back, defending, the deepest part of the field, and they just were letting everything in front of them. And I thought that was a terrible way to coach. Again, I don't know how they didn't run at least a play with 20 seconds to go on a timeout, and they should have had 2 timeouts, like I said. I think Sean McDermott got out-coached in the second half, and I think that's been a storyline so many times, but it gets underlooked because they've made the playoffs in 5-6 straight years, tied for the longest with the Chiefs. But when they get to the playoffs, they don't win anything. They don't win these types of games. I don't know how you can defend Sean McDermott much longer. Yes, he changed the culture. He got them back on track. But are they ever going to win a Super Bowl with this guy? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's something that that we discussed at the start of the year. I remember podcast 1. I called a crossroads year, and I didn't put McDermott on the hot seat, but, I did. People called me crazy. I did wonder if he was outright the guy to kind of, move forward. And
what's wild is the Bills haven't lost by more than 6 points this season.
Yeah.
And they gave up game-winning drives to Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Russell Wilson, and now Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. They're a 500 team with a over 100-point differential in their favor.
Yeah, it comes down to McDermott's defense. On the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter or overtime, they're giving up game-winning drives to, 3 quarterbacks that had no business doing that. And, I mean, Jalen Hurts is good, but what kind of play calling was that on his game-winning touchdown? He had the whole middle of the field open.
Right. Especially, I think, after the fact. Who was it? Was it Jason Kelsey? No, it was Jordan Mailata who said that, they literally took that play out of the Bills' playbook, more or less. So if that's not one of the more damning things you could ever have in sport, is having one of your own plays go against you, something that you see, in theory, at least once a year in a practice, that's brutal. It's a brutal way to go down.
How about the fact that the Bills had 505 yards of
Yeah.
offense compared to their 378?
Hmm.
And even though they got dominated in the second half, they still had that much more yardage. They had more first downs. They had the ball for 40 minutes, had 150 more passing yards, more yards per play, 13 for 22 on third down. Josh Allen was using his legs. It was so nice to see. I don't know if we're going to really talk about that. Obviously, again, it's only 2 games, but it just seems like he's definitely playing more free since Joe Brady's taken over. Well, you look at last week, what did he run the ball 7 times,
Hmm.
9 times this game? Some big 3rd and 10s where he wasn't running in the beginning of the year. Now he's running. It seems like the Josh Allen of old is back. Yeah, he did have a bad interception. I can't believe he threw the ball 51 times in the rain, though.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good transition to talk about the offense here briefly. Maybe not briefly, I guess we'll see. But yeah, 29 for 51 in the rain. Um,
Some of those are drop passes.
yeah, but like, and the thing too, though, with it is, I kind of get it. Not my probably preferred method of going about it in the rain, but like I said a few minutes ago, I mean, the Eagles' pass defense really good. Their pass defense not as good. So I get it. 2 touchdowns and a reception, 9 carries, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Yeah, I'd say that was classic Josh Allen.
And how about that? What was it? That 20-yard run in the third quarter
Mhm.
where he sidestepped the defender and
Yeah,
made him fall? That was nice.
yeah,
You don't see many quarterbacks do that.
no, it helps when you're agile enough and fast enough to do stuff like that.
And if you
So
notice, he's been way more fired up when he
yeah,
scores, more energized. He knew the moment was huge. It just, you kind of just wish, man, something could have happened before week 10, it was.
mhm,
I do think it's too late now, especially after last night.
yeah. Who knows though? I mean, we'll touch on that stuff here in a couple minutes here with the bye week. So there's nothing to really preview. So we'll talk about some external things, I suppose, with the Bills. James Cook, 16 carries, 43 yards. Despite though the drop pass, 6 receptions, 57 yards. So, we talked about how he bounced back on the route a little bit, but this is kind of the first or second time really seeing James Cook really kind of handle a balanced load as a running back, and I thought he did again. I get it, drop pass, maybe a negative on the score chart that a lot of coaches keep, but that was just a really good game by James Cook too, though, in the grand scheme of it.
Yeah, he's getting, seems like they like him in the passing game. I just quickly thought of this. Maybe he's going to be kind of used like Alvin Kamara does. If you look at his
Right.
receptions, he runs the ball and catches the ball. So maybe they're going to try to use him both ways. And yeah, he had 7 targets, 1 drop. That was that drop ball. Other than that, he caught most of the targets. So yeah, I mean, I liked what I've seen from James Cook this year. Like I said, he does have some big runs at times. I know 16 rushes for 43 yards doesn't look great, but yeah, I still thought he was played a big impact.
Yeah, definitely. And then it was a pretty balanced overall attack through the air again. I mean, we mentioned James Cook with 6 receptions. Your leading receiver, technically, as we always say, it goes by yardage, was Gabe Davis with 6 for 105 and a touchdown.
He made some big
Yeah,
plays.
Diggs had 6 receptions, 74 yards and a touchdown. So you had a nice trifecta of leading guys there reception-wise. Kincaid, I believe, had 5 as well. So it wasn't like anybody was getting singled out again. Well, like before maybe in a way. And
Latavius
I don't.
Murray
Yeah,
catches.
yeah, and I don't know if we can put to bed maybe a little bit of like the stuff about Diggs we were talking about, but you want to talk about a guy who was fired up for his team yesterday a lot? Diggs was, and makes me wonder that despite maybe having a funnel effect on him in the Ken Dorsey offense, maybe not quite having that in the Joe Brady, but just having a different culture is kind of working its wonders on him a little bit, right? I mean, he was fired up yesterday a lot, and that was good to see. We haven't seen what I will call the positive fired up Stephon Diggs a ton, the past couple months. So I'd like to imagine that maybe he's also taken a little bit of a corner as well here.
Yeah, and after that miscommunication in overtime between Josh and Gabe, when when he threw it to the end zone, Obviously, Gabe Davis, I don't know if you saw the shot, went over and threw his helmet.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see Diggs come right over and like kind of talk to him and calm him down. Um, he is a team captain. That seemed like a captain moment right there, so that was good to see.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just feel like as a whole, the energy is a lot more, or the energy is there a lot more than it was when Ken Dorsey was there.
Mhm.
Just seems like everyone's playing their own style of game. Everyone's playing free. They just care about, winning and other guys making big plays. Like Diggs did have 11 targets. And Gabe Davis had 12 targets, so they were getting targeted a lot. But Diggs did drop a couple. But again, it was pouring rain. I
Yeah.
can't believe we even had this kind of score in the rain.
Right.
I was shocked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, usually, like we said, I mean, when you get to these games, usually it's a lot more of a ground game, and it just didn't really end up being that case.
Yeah.
It's not like the Eagles were exactly running the ball either. To
Yeah.
be fair, I mean, a lot of their runs. I know we talk about the game-winning one by Hurts, but a lot of those were for him that when he took off were meant to be dropbacks and passes, not him taking off. That's for sure. One quick thing here before we get to our discussion about the bye week and some outlook and expectations we have for the team kind of going forward here. Shaq Lawson post game gets into it with a fan on
It
the
was actually during
sideline.
the game. It
Was
was
it?
embarrassing.
Ah, okay. So, uh,
Because if you
you
look
know,
behind, you can see everyone lined up.
yeah, I always have the weird take about this in a lot of sense. So, like, obviously, we don't know the prerequisites in a sense about what happened here, right? But I always say I go back to something that when it happened, a couple of times with like Russell Westbrook in the NBA. There was a time I believe, who was it with the Giants in Jacksonville got into it with somebody. But either way, I don't condone athletes necessarily going at fans, but a lot of fans get out of hand really quickly, and if you're playing, you have to remember when you're playing a sport, that's still you're doing your job, right? And the way I always equate it is you wouldn't want somebody coming into your place of work and really heckling the ever living crap out of you and saying some of the stuff that they're probably saying to these players. Again, doesn't excuse what Shaq Lawson did, but I mean we know Philly fans have this connotation about them for a reason. In an ideal world, I'd love to sit here and know what was said on both sides so we could have a better, maybe overall viewpoint on this. But unfortunately, we really only have the one viewpoint, and that is of it being kind of one-sided, if you will, with Shaq going at the fan. But I will say this, I highly doubt it was some unprovoked move by Lawson.
Yeah, the way they reacted, obviously these athletes are always used to heckling and hearing negative things. I feel like it had to be something personal, maybe
Yeah.
family related, because the way they reacted, I don't think they would have left the bench. I think they would have maybe said something from the bench. But yeah, I think those Philly fans definitely said something like crazy that really got them mad. So I don't know. Again, I agree that he shouldn't have went over there, but also, I mean, these Philly fans are crazy. I don't know if you saw the video before pregame. A kid went over to
Yeah.
shake
Yeah.
his hand. Like, I mean, they're getting raised like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's how crazy Philly is.
They
But at least they're passionate.
They booed Santa.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm expecting him to definitely at least be fine, though, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing too, right? Like I said, it ends up becoming a one-sided deal because we just don't know what's going on. But excuse me, at the end of the day, something had to have provoked. You don't just do that type of stuff unprovoked.
Yeah.
All right, like I mentioned, no preview of a game ahead this week. Bye week needed for the Bills. Let's start here. We've been talking about it a ton. If you were to sit here and tell me after week 12 the Bills would be 500 going into the bye week, we all probably would have called you crazy, but that's what we got here ahead of us now. But just how big in your mind, Kyle, is this bye week for the Bills? Because they have arguably the toughest slate of games ahead that any team will face this year. And for a team that's banged up, nothing goes better health-wise than a bye week.
Yeah, it's definitely huge, but I almost, wish it was maybe even before this Philly game.
Right.
Because Dane Jackson was out, Taylor Rapp was out, and obviously other guys that are, probably going to still be done for the year. And then there's like a rumor that Dawson Knox is still on his way back. I feel like that's going to ruin the offense, but that's another conversation. But yeah, it's definitely still big. I guess, it just feels like there's not much of a chance, but I guess there is. And that KC game is so huge, coming out of the bye week. So yeah, I would say it's still good timing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing that lies ahead, right? Is week 14, Kansas City. Now, that's a Kansas City team that also, they got the win against the Raiders this past weekend, but they haven't looked amazing by any means. And that's obviously, different division and everything, and not what the Bills are fighting for. If there's any solace for the Bills, it's that can they, in theory, catch the Dolphins? Yeah. I mean, everything is still on the table division-wise. I think, though, you have to be fighting for that wild card spot at this point. And I'll kind of back what you kind of said in a way. I'll kind of ride and maybe take a different take. No matter what happens, you're not out until you're out. The way maybe that's just the way I view it because, I've not been a part of many winning sports teams in my time, but the dog in me always says that unless the light's completely out, unless the door's completely closed, that you always have a shot. And I'd say the Bills still have plenty of open space ahead of them to make a move, but the margin for error now is admittedly a lot smaller. We talked about how now 2 weeks ago, that Jets game was 2 games ago rather, that Jets game was make or break more or less. They got that done. And going into this Philly game, I don't know if we were exactly riding the same mantra, but it had to have been the same idea. And the fact that they were on the doorstep of it and didn't get it done, it's brutal. And I think, to something you brought up, Kyle, in a way, you wish the bye week was maybe a week before. I almost wish the bye week, though, now was like not this weekend, but next weekend or something like that where, you're able to go out and not more or less sit on this loss for an extended period of days. That way the Bills get to the facility today, and it's right into Kansas City mode, right? It's right in the plan for the weekend ahead mode. The bye weeks are always a little bit different. Yeah, you're planning a little bit, but a lot of it now for a bye week for NFL teams, it's a lot of conditioning. It's a lot of get yourself right type stuff, not obviously the typical get ready for the next game ahead type deal. And, the mindset of athletes is always different at every level you'll get to, but, at the end of the day, that the negatives always creep in the mind a little bit. And I do worry about, like I said, they're sitting on this for an extended period of days where if they were playing, they wouldn't be. And that does get me concerned a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. They're going to be, getting some time off now because, having a bye week. That's actually probably not a good thing. And even like on the offensive side of the ball, you just had 2 really good weeks on offense, and now you're going to get a week off, and you're going to think about this loss. And yeah, I think you might be right. I didn't really think about that. So we'll see what happens. I think they got to win 4 of their 5 games, honestly, to have a chance. I think if they win out, they're in, definitely. But then you just look at the teams in front of them. I mean, which team is most annoying? I think you would agree with me here. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They keep finding ways.
Yeah.
They just and I saw the broadcast yesterday. 30 is the easiest schedule remaining.
Yeah.
So they're going to be in. Is Cleveland going to actually start falling downhill now? Are the Colts going to start losing games? Texans did lose yesterday, and then you look at Denver, they've won 5 in a row. You have all these teams in front of them now. So it's just like, and then you look, and even Vegas is only a game behind. It's crazy. So I don't know. I just think the AFC this year getting in is going to be extremely tough. And then with their schedule still, I think it's going to be very tough. And how about the fact that the Bills are 1-4 on the road,
Yeah,
and 3 of their 5 remaining games are on the road.
yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah. I don't know about winning 5 of this or 4 of the 5.
Well, that'll put them at 10. I think it's going to take 10 because a
It
lot of the teams in front of them already
yeah.
have 7. So that's just my thinking.
I mean, the tough part for me is, and I mean, I've been a big Cleveland guy all year, but I part of me thinks the injury bug finally just might have taken its toll on them. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but they got dinged up to high heaven,
Yeah, ruined
high
my bet.
heaven yesterday. Yeah, that's right. Forgot about that for you.
+2.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Pittsburgh's the one that they just keep finding a way. They finally had a 400-yard game for the first time in over a season,
Yeah.
technically. So, yeah, I mean, they keep finding a way. You mentioned Vegas. They come out of the gates really good every game, and then something usually happens.
I think the Colts
The Colts are the weird one in there that I
6-5.
yeah, I don't know what to make of them. I don't know, but you know, I think that segues pretty nicely into maybe our last talking point with the overall expectations and the outlook for the rest of the year. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but like if you're a Bills fan, you got to be prepared for Week 18 to be meaningless football against the Dolphins, and not the good kind of meaningless football, as we become accustomed to around here. You know, um, it's weird because we had collectively higher expectations for this team this year, albeit I feel like maybe slightly lower than seasons past in a way. But the fact of the matter is, at minimum, playoffs were expected,
Yep.
and you're on the outside looking in, more or less, at this point.
Yeah, and when you have 7
Yeah,
teams in each conference that can make the playoffs, and the Bills, who have this kind of roster, this kind of quarterback, don't make the playoffs, I don't know how people don't lose their jobs over this.
right.
I mean, you look at these games, some of them are literally coaching issues. I mean, you're blowing leads late in games, you're playing soft coverage. Like, I don't know. I just don't know how Sean McDermott will ever, help this team win a Super Bowl
Mm.
the way things have gone.
Would you say the next 5 games make or break Sean McDermott for next season?
Yeah, personally, I think it should be that way, but I just feel like no matter what, this organization just loves Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, and since they've made the playoffs every year since I think it was the first year they didn't make it, and then they made it since.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but yeah, he's led them to the playoff. I think like they're okay with that. Kind of reminds me of I hate to do this, but it kind of reminds me of the Yankees situation. As long as they make the playoffs, it doesn't matter how far they go, they're happy. Or as long as they win the division, they're happy. That's just the way it seems here with Sean McDermott. I just think they love him too much, where no matter what happens, they will not move on from him. But hopefully I'm wrong. I do love what you mentioned before we started. Frank Reich would be a wonderful hire, I think.
Yeah,
And I do think the way Joe Brady's, leading the offense, if this continues, bring him back.
yeah. Frank Reich was just fired from Carolina, and again, this isn't Panthers Weekly. This is Bills Weekly, but not his fault. The stuff going on in Carolina. You want to talk about meddling ownership? Panthers have it. Yeah, the interesting part is, right, no matter what happens in the coaching cycle, there's always somebody who has like a really great run the last half of a season and into the playoffs, and then all of a sudden they shoot up the ladder, right, and everything. Trying to think, from my experience with teams, Sean McVay kind of rises to that occasion a little bit. Um, Frank Reich would be really good. Although I kind of think I flip flop though with you, Kyle. If you're going to do the change and involve Frank Reich, I actually think you bring Joe Brady on as head coach and make Reich your OC. To be honest.
Somebody did mention promoting Joe Brady to head coach, saying that anything could be better than Sean McDermott. And
Well,
for a minute, I was like, what? And then I thought about it. I was like, all right, yeah, maybe that's not a bad idea. So I don't know. I think we can have this conversation, but I feel like
Right.
no matter what, the organization won't have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I just hope, from, being a Bills fan and, watching all the games, that at least week 18 is interesting. Even I guess if they don't make it because they're 6-6 right now, you kind of don't think there's much of a chance, but at least make that final game in Miami, a game that matters, that if you win, you could be in.
Yeah.
And I just hope it doesn't get to the point where even if we get to that Week 17 Patriots game, that it doesn't matter. That would suck. It would feel like the old days again, where the final few weeks don't mean anything. So yeah, very disappointing though how this season has gone.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's the thing too, right? Like we aren't we are having like this coaching conversation just to draw buzz. I think it's it's got to be something that they have to have as a general conversation kind of going forward. I don't think much of this is on Brandon Beane, at least not yet. You could make the case he probably should have been more aggressive in the offseason, maybe pursuing guys. But at the end of the day, outside of a couple pieces here and there, it's predominantly the same team as last year. So,
And if you look at these losses,
and even then, though, he brought in, not to interrupt, but like he brought in Russo Douglas at the deadline and stuff like that. I mean, you can only do so much as a GM when you bring people in and you think that they're the right pieces. And on the field, they're making impacts. Like Russell Douglas maybe didn't have as big an impact as he did last week, this past week, but like since he's been in Buffalo, he's been producing pretty good,
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think Brandon Beane is, definitely most of the blame here because if you look at like some of these losses, it comes down to players, in the final minutes executing and some better coaching, and that hasn't been the case. And I mean, I seriously do believe that this team should be 9-3 right now.
Yeah.
At least that Denver game had to be a win, the Patriots game had to be a win, and you basically almost stole a game against the best team in football yesterday.
Yeah.
If you just closed it out. So I think this team should be sitting 9-3, and we'd be talking top of the AFC right now, potentially still the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
It would be a much better podcast and a much better time.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Mm-hmm. Not as great as we thought, certainly at this point in the year. So, bye week, Kyle. Just going to be red zone dependent this weekend, I suppose, for your case?
Yeah, it's going to be definitely different. And then what do they got? So they open after that against KC at 4:25, and then Dallas at 4:25, and then the Chargers. It's a night game on a Saturday.
Isn't it they only have one more 1 p.m. game at the moment, right?
Yeah. Remember, the Patriots is a 1 o'clock game, and then whatever happens with that Miami game, which will probably be 1 o'clock, because the game won't mean anything.
Right.
So.
But, of course, also the main thing, too, is I think we're 1 more week away from flexing, I believe, beginning, if I remember right. So,
yeah.
Who knows what might actually happen there. But I doubt Fox will want to give up a Dallas Cowboys game at this point.
Yeah, if you're a Bills fan, I think it's time to probably start looking for a team to root for in the playoffs. For me, I think I am just going to roll with the Detroit Lions. I mean, it's a tough Thanksgiving loss. Just like him as a team.
Man Campbell.
And I know it's not really that great to root for an AFC team if you like an AFC team, but I do like CJ Stroud. I think he's so fun to watch. Tough loss yesterday for them too. So yeah, I think we're not going to be seeing the Bills in the playoffs for the first time in 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be so different.
I don't have that in my body yet to do that after I just talked about how I view the thing there. So I think the door's open. Maybe not as open as you want, but I don't think it's as tightly closed as maybe some people perceive it. But can't have margin for error anymore. Margin for error is gone, in my opinion. So we're on the same page, I think, kind of here with the Bills at this point. So, Kyle, I think that about does it here for Weekly this week, Bills Weekly. Next week, back at it again, 10 a.m. Monday here. We will be previewing the Chiefs game, as well as any news that happens to break involving the Bills, or maybe NFL as a whole, as we talked about Frank Reich for a couple minutes here today. But, it's an interesting name to keep an eye on. So, Kyle, appreciate you. Anything this week big coming up here? I know, not too sure how many of you are crossover Orange fans here, but I know me and you are anxiously awaiting whatever decision gets made for the Syracuse football. I know you'll be the first on that and give out the best info you can on that. So
Still looking for a head coach
yeah,
as well.
not Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I saw that late last night. Obviously, Syracuse basketball, and it's starting to get to the busy part of the schedule here. So definitely not going to be bored at any point this week.
For sure.
Hopefully tonight's game is not boring. What is it, Vikings Bears, if I remember right?
Yeah.
Not a fan of that, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm kind of footballed out for the weekend. I think,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, love Thanksgiving football and everything, but you begin with 3 games on Thursday like that. You kind of get to that Sunday night game like last night, and you're kind of just fatigued out a little bit.
Yeah, did you agree, though, the Thanksgiving games, the Black Friday game just sucked? They just weren't like any. They didn't live up to the hype. I mean, obviously, we knew the Jets-Dolphins game wasn't going to be good, but I just felt like until the Sunday games, the NFL slate was just not good.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of greatly played games, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of bad quarterback play this year.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah.
A lot of injuries, too, especially to quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's I mean, we almost lost Baker Mayfield yesterday even.
Yeah.
We lost DTR for the Browns, which we already talked about, so that means apparently Joe Flacco is starting for the Browns next week. So
Watch out, Joe Flacco's
is
gonna
he
lead 'em.
elite? Is he elite? We finally get to find out. So I think that we'll officially close the book on Bills Weekly this week. We kind of went off the rails there a little bit, but it's part of it. We're coming off of Thanksgiving too here, guys. I mean, come on, we're just like you. We're people. Come on. So no fire alarm to send us off into the sunset here. Shout out Scott Hansen. So for Kyle Evans, thanks, buddy.
Yep.
Seeing you here.
See everyone Thursday if you want to join
betting
the betting podcast.
Yes. Get to fade us at this point, me and you. So, all right, thanks for listening and watching, everybody. You can find Bills Weekly here on FingerLakes1.com, FL1 YouTube channel, and all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Amazon Music, but we're just limited to there. We'll be back again next Monday at 10 a.m. To preview the Chiefs game. Until then, let's go Buffalo.